Welcome. This is the second session in the series with Chamber of Commerce. This session is on assessment complaints and procedures and filing forms and filling out forms. Thank you. Hi, my name is John Allen. I'm the City Assessor from City of Medicine Hat. A little bit of my background. 9 years as a small business owner. Then I took some educational courses from UBC, real estate licensing course in 1981, agents course in 1985. I completed the urban land economics program with a 4-year diploma with appraisal option in 1993. I'm a professional member of the Real Estate Institute of BC. In my previous life, I've been an investor owner of 2 commercial buildings, rental house, mobile home park, a duplex, sixplex. I've built a couple of additions, done many renovations, and 2 complete buildings. Been a realtor, real estate agency owner, property manager, court-appointed receiver of rents, managed 220 rentals, several strata buildings, and an 80,000 square foot commercial flex building. Joined BC Assessment in 1990. My background, I was immediately involved in commercial assessment work and appeals. I've been involved in all levels of appeals and valuation of most types of property. Worked in BC, Alberta, and Saskatchewan. In 2005, I answered a call from Saskatchewan Assessment Management Agency, commonly known as SAMA, which resulted in my moving to Saskatchewan to lead the provincial revaluation unit, which included the introduction of the income approach in SAMA jurisdictions for the 2009 assessment roll. I came to Medicine Hat in October of 2011 as a city assessor. Assessment complaints and procedures. This presentation is intended to introduce the complaint procedure. It's intended to supplement independent professional advice, not to replace it. I will provide some perspective on the formal process of an assessment review as an assessor. It's not an all-encompassing step-by-step how-to manual. I will try to present some lessons learned over the past 25 years in the assessment profession. The Alberta complaints procedure, it's assumed that you completed the review process, the first session, and discussed the property with the assessment department. You may have reached agreement on some issues, but you have remaining issues that will require a hearing. Gather the issues that you have outstanding. You will need to list them on the complaint form. Preliminary issues may be raised prior to or at a complaint hearing. Section 295, information requested by the assessor. Section 299 or 300, information requested by the complainant, the property owner. Disclosure documents. MRAC regulation compliance, onus of proof, precedent-setting decisions, post facto sales, third-party documents. I'll go through these one by one. So income and expense forms. This is where a complainant has failed to comply with a Section 295 request. When an assessor requests information, it's required to be completed and sent back to the assessor within 60 days. And then Section 2954 states that no person may make a complaint in the year following if the information is not returned within 60 days. The Composite Assessment Review Board last year will confirm those facts, and in previous hearings in 2013 they have explained that they lack the jurisdiction to hear an appeal. So in that case, the appeals that meet those facts would be dismissed. Preliminary appeal issue 299-300, information requested by the complainant. An owner is allowed to request specific information that the assessor has on file for the current year's assessment. They're also allowed to request summary information on a comparable property. Both of these requests must be in writing using the approved form. In the case of a 300 request, there is a fee of $38 for each property that's set by city bylaw. An assessor is required to supply the information that's requested within 15 days if the information is not already available, such as on the website. The time allowed is important. If you need the requested information before you file your complaint form, you will need to ensure that you allow 15 days plus delivery and review time. If information is not received, there is a compliance process, but the complaint must still be filed by the deadline. The compliance process is through municipal affairs. Preliminary issue of disclosure. The complaint process requires full disclosure with dates set by legislation. The matters relating to assessment complaints, Section 8. Only issues that have been identified on the complaint form can be adjudicated on by the board, MRAC Section 9.1. Only information that is properly disclosed can be heard by a board, MRAC Section 9.2. New issues or attempts to introduce new evidence can be objected to. Preliminary appeal issue matters relating to assessment complaints regulation, MRAC. This regulation covers all matters related to the complaint process, procedures, and the boards. There's forms for complaints and forms for agents, jurisdiction and powers of the boards, hearing records, procedure, decisions, and scheduling. Everything is covered in this regulation. The rules are designed to allow for a fair hearing. Lack of compliance can result in evidence being excluded, dismissal, or an award of costs. Preliminary appeal issue onus of proof. This principle is referred to as the onus of proof can be raised by the assessor. It's a very basic principle that requires that the party that's raising the complaint must present evidence that is sufficient to raise doubt about the issue under complaint. If the evidence is not sufficient, onus does not transfer to the respondent for a reply. So in this case, if there's nothing presented or not enough information presented that changes the onus over to the assessor, the hearing could be closed at that point. A lack of evidence or no evidence, it was ruled on by the panel on several hearings, and some were dismissed immediately as nothing was disclosed, nothing was entered. Precedent-setting decisions. Decisions from previous cases are often seen as setting a precedent. However, the board has the power to determine if a decision is a precedent and what evidence it will hear. Higher level court decisions on point may have more weight given to them, while a decision from another city at the same level board may be considered but may not be seen as a precedent. The city has a collection of assessment decisions and legislation quotes that can be used for a reference, and it's available on the city website. If a case is directly on point, the whole case may need to be reviewed and included so that a board can read the whole case in context. Post facto basically means after the valuation date or later information. Valuation evidence is required to be from the time period prior to July 1st of the preceding year. Evidence from the market that happens after July 1st cannot be used to establish the assessment roll. This cutoff date allows the province and the assessor time to analyze data on an equal foundation across the province. While sale information from after the cutoff may confirm a trend, typically it would not have been available during the analysis period, and it would be used for the following year. Third-party documents. Little weight is given to a report containing information that is not verified and supported in the hearing by the writer of the report. This is a legal proceeding. Evidence must not only be disclosed to be given any weight, it has to be market-derived valuation data. What may appear to be a fact may be an unsupported opinion. The board asked the following question last year so that they could determine what weight to give the evidence that was presented. The complainant was asked, please explain what standard appraisal procedure have you used to arrive at your suggested value. In the reasons and conclusions of the case, the board stated that they considered the evidence given as being unsubstantiated opinion. The case was dismissed. The preliminary appeal issue. This list can go on as there are many legislative requirements and regulations. Important to note that the board establishes their hearing procedures and the rules. Preliminary issues may be ruled on immediately, or the decision may be withheld and delivered later with the hearing decision. Preliminary issues and objections can be raised in advance if known, or they may be raised at the hearing in response to an issue. It is best that they are raised as soon as possible to allow for consideration and a response. The board may award costs against a party for conduct or actions that cause hearings that did not have a reasonable chance of a success, as it did last year when it awarded $2,625 against an agent who did not file a disclosure and did not withdraw the complaint in a reasonable time period. The complaint form and a wealth of assessment information is available on the city website. This is a screenshot of the tab under assessment. There's quite a few bullets there. If you go to the assessment tab, you'll find a tab saying appealing your assessment. Click on that. You can then see another list that drops down, and you can click on to file a complaint. This is the Assessment Review Board complaint form. Fill in all the boxes on here. Indicate what type of assessment notice you're appealing, making a complaint about. Identify the assessment role, property address, legal description. Be as clear as you can. Indicate what the property type is. If it's 3 units or under residential or farmland, they go to a local assessment review board, whereas the more complex properties, 4 and over residential, non-residential, they go to the composite assessment review board. Section 3 of the form, this lays out who it is that's making the complaint, mailing address, contact information, email address. There's 2 potential issues here. First one is that the person filing the complaint has to be the assessed person or the taxpayer. The second part relates to an agent. If someone other than the owner is filing the complaint, then the authorization of agent form must be filed with the complaint form as well as the fee. Section 4, now I've got cut from the front of the form here, and you'll see the 10 boxes across the top, and the section 299-300. Then the second section here, the midsection of this slide, is from the back of the form describing what the 10 boxes are. Typically, an assessment amount is the most common complaint. Don't confuse assessment class and subclass with the classification of the building. Assessment class would be whether it was, say, residential versus farm. Subclass would be whether it was residential or multifamily. Like I said, most complaints are in box 3. Each relevant box should be checked off, and the next section should support the individual boxes. So additional pages can be attached and referenced in section 5. Information that you requested under a section 299 or 300. If you intend to make a request for information, you must use the form found on the city website. The assessor is allowed up to 15 days to complete the request, longer if you're requesting information on more than 5 properties. So you should make your request far enough in advance so that you can still file the complaint prior to the deadline. Okay, section 5, this is considered the most critical part of the complaint form, and these bullets here it's very important to walk through them individually, okay? Because the regulation prohibits an assessment review board from hearing any matter in support of an issue that is not identified on the complaint form. So each issue or matter that you want to discuss in a hearing, you have to identify it here. So if you want to discuss it, this is where you need to start the discussion with the grounds. And a hint to everyone is to read each bullet and repeat each of the steps with each issue and attach additional paper. New issues cannot be introduced later. You enter the requested value. The review panel does refer to this value, so it's important to have what your estimate is for the assessment. Some of the points to consider when you're completing this Section 5. The review board does not know your property. Okay? There's a provincial member that's the chairman, and then there's 2 local members, but they don't know your property. Okay? You should not assume that. The assessor and the review panel will read this section looking for the relevant points of the valuation that you are questioning. What is the error? Don't make the common mistake of saying the value is wrong. The value is a result. Identify what piece of valuation data is wrong that created the result. Another common area is percentage change or percentage increase from last year. It's not a valid issue. If you do not have all the facts that you need, you still need to complete this section as best you can. You should identify all issues and matters on this section of the form, and then you supply your supporting evidence in your disclosure document for the hearing by the disclosure deadline. So if this section is blank or incomplete, the assessor will request that the complaint be dismissed, as the board is only allowed to hear information about matters that are identified on this section. Section 5A and B and Section 6. The board requests a statement about discussions and the outcome, and this is like the preliminary discussion that you have with the assessor when you call in to discuss your assessment. The filing fee must accompany the complaint form to the clerk's office. And it's important to note that the clerk does not determine if your complaint is valid. The clerk is a recorder of the complaint. She's a scheduler of the complaint hearing, a receiver of the agency form and the complaint fee. Only the board can rule that a complaint is invalid or is going to be heard or is not going to be heard. Preliminary issues on validity, etc., can be raised at the hearing. This is the agency form, which you can find on the city website. It must be filed with a complaint and the complaint fee if you're using an agent. I draw your attention to point 5. If you want the agent to be able to access the property information for you, you'll still need to complete a Section 299 form indicating what they can access. Point 6. Costs can be incurred. It's just advice in the document that the agent basically can incur costs that would be recoverable from the owner of the property. Once appointed, you step out of the process, and typically the assessor deals with the agent until the agency is revoked. Point 8 is an acknowledgement that the agent has disclosed their qualifications, professional designation, certifications, and affiliations, if any, with respect to property assessment or appraisal. Consultants, agents. To date, as far as I know, the province of Ontario is the only one that has established governing rules for property tax agents. So anyone acting as an agent in Ontario is now required to be registered as a paralegal with the Law Society and falls under their ethics and professional practice rules. In Alberta, it's up to the property owner to determine qualifications and experience if they are appointing an agent. In 2013, there were 3 national agents, 3 local realtors, and 3 law firms acting as agents. And there was property owners were acting for themselves as well. Alberta Provincial Review Board decisions can be reviewed on the provincial website. They post all the decisions and you can search them. Property owners, I would encourage you to consider discussing your complaint with an agent that has extensive assessment hearing experience. As you review the decisions, you will note that the boards expect to have market evidence presented that will assist them in reaching a decision. Boards weigh the evidence provided in the hearing. Assessors are required to be members of the Alberta Assessors Association. Members of the Appraisal Institute of Canada can join the Assessors Association. Alberta has specific assessment educational requirements. While some of the training and theory are common, Application, legislation, and regulations separate appraisal and assessment into distinct specialties. Appraisers typically do not do mass appraisal. Assessors typically are required to do mass appraisal. Alberta appraisers are licensed by the Alberta Real Estate Council. Depending on their experience and designation, they can appraise different types of property. Candidate members typically start with residential property and over time can move into the appraisal of more complex property. Until candidates are accredited, the appraisal associations usually require that commercial assignments are signed off by a fully accredited supervisory appraiser. Other consultants. Lawyers often appear, most likely due to the legal nature of the review procedures. There are some lawyers in Alberta that have developed their assessment work into a specialty area of practice and may use appraisal or assessment consultants as required. Realtors are not licensed to do assessments or appraisals, but often act as agents due to related property management or sales activity. The Real Estate Council has a policy paper that directs realtors to make a disclosure when preparing a market evaluation. The disclosure, in layman's terms, is a clarification that a market evaluation is not an appraisal. Market evaluations are expected to be in conjunction with a listing presentation. The Real Estate Council licenses appraisers as a separate profession. All decisions of the Provincial Composite Assessment Review Boards are posted online and are searchable. Decisions provide background on legal issues and reasons for decisions. Issues that have reached the higher level courts are often quoted. Mass appraisal versus market value. Now, if you listen to the first session, some of these slides are repeating, but for emphasis. Assessment valuation and application can be distinctly different from private appraisal valuation. Market value is defined by legislation as a specific value arrived at using mass appraisal. It goes on to define mass appraisal. In layman's terms, similar buildings are required to be grouped and valued using common factors, not actual income, and following all of the legislation and regulations. The rules and the dates must be followed. The assessment role must pass the audit when we upload the sales. Mass appraisal. It's important to understand that mass appraisal will give an indication of market value using common data and rates. It does not use actual income and expense data from a property. When an assessor gathers individual property data, it is analyzed with the data from the group of similar properties, and the median numbers are used for the assessment valuation of that group. Half of the actual numbers will be above the median and half will be below. Assessor will provide a valuation form that will show all of the factors and rates used to calculate the assessment for your property. The rates come from the group. If the actual physical data is correct, the next area of review is the classification or group that the assessor has placed the property in. The comparable group. Review the non-residential valuation package. It can be obtained from the city website assessment tab. It has explanations for all of the grouping and the qualities. Discuss the classification and the quality assigned with the assessor and compare it to other buildings within the same group. There is a listing of all the classifications and qualities assigned for all the non-residential properties on the website. Classification and quality is the opinion of the assessor and is intended to estimate the potential typical income that an investor would receive. The valuation flows from that classification and quality. The income derived is then used to calculate the assessed value. Income divided by rate is equal to value. The rate is based on properties that have sold. Income is divided by the sale price, and that equals the rate. The primary issue of most appeals, then, is the income derived from the comparable group and the sales used to calculate the rate. Some of the typical hearing questions. What is the matter under complaint? We would go back to section 5 of the complaint form to find the issues and matters that have been listed. What evidence can be presented to support an argument? Evidence must be in the disclosure document and relate to the issues that are on the complaint form. What is evidence? Well, market data from the valuation period prior to July 1st. When does evidence get presented? It's presented in the disclosure document to the other party. There are some times and dates. Then in turn, you present it to the board in the hearing. Who decides? The board determines what evidence it will hear and what weight it will give to that evidence. There are some rules. Disclosures. This is your evidence that you've submitted by the appropriate time, and it must be received by the exchange date. New evidence is not allowed to be introduced at the hearing. There is some very limited exceptions. Assessment valuation dates in Alberta. The value should reflect what a property would sell for on July 1st of the year before the roll year. But the building state and condition is to reflect what existed there at the end of the year, basically December 31st prior to the roll year. Market evidence is required to be from the period prior to July 1st of the year preceding the roll. Typically it would be from last year prior to July 1st. For example, valid adjusted sales for up to 3 12-month market periods are uploaded to the provincial asset system. Depending on the number of sales, 1 year could be used, or up to 3 years may be used in the audit process. Sales must reflect the July 1st valuation date. Sales must be adjusted to July 1st. They have to be arm's length. This requires verification to remove sales that should not be used to set assessment values. Sales should be an indicator of typical market actions and conditions, nothing with duress. Purchaser and vendor should not be related, and they must be representative of the normal, fully informed participants in the market. Valuation data for 2014. This is one of the key aspects of the valuation. Common data must be used for groups of properties. Rental data must be gathered and analyzed for groups of properties each year. Standards must be established, analyzed, and applied back to the properties. Valuation parameters such as rent, vacancy, expenses, cap rate, and other items like excess land or improvements that are not included in the rental rate need to be valued and included in the valuation. Check the valuation data. Contact the assessor to confirm data and to question any perceived differences. Often this call can resolve physical data questions. Differences of opinion will require additional work. In the event that differences cannot be resolved, the next step is to consider filing the formal complaint. You should always be aware of the complaint deadline. Prepare the basic parts of the complaint form in advance and be prepared to file before the deadline. This is the process and the timeline. The roll was declared on March 20th. Basically that means that that's been uploaded to the provincial asset data and declared to be complete. Assessment notices were then mailed on March 28th. That gives an inquiry period that runs until June 4th, and that is the filing deadline for a complaint. After a hearing date is set by the city clerk's office, basically the clerk of the assessment board, each party to the appeal will have appeal disclosure submission deadlines. So the local board, which is mostly residential up to 3 units, they have to file their disclosure 21 days before the hearing. The assessor responds at least 7 days before the hearing, and then the complainant can issue a rebuttal to the respondent's information 3 days before the hearing. And the session for the composite review board is mostly commercial properties and over 3 unit residential. The dates are extended. The complainant has to file 42 days before the hearing, the respondent 14 days before the hearing, and then the complainant can respond to the respondent's document 7 days before the hearing. It's called a rebuttal. There are mailing and delivery rules. Thank you. If you have any questions regarding this session, please forward them through to the Chamber of Commerce or to the City Assessor. I'll try to get back to you as time allows. Uh, this is the second of the sessions. The next session will deal with the actual hearing and disclosure in the hearing. And the last session of the 4 is on some of the Composite Assessment Review Board decisions from 2013. Thank you for your time.